Hello fellow Aero Riders. Look, disclaimer, I'm no YouTuber. This ain't gonna be no 4K video. I'm just trying to help out the community. I didn't see any other videos like this online about this particular vehicle, so you saw the thumbnail, you know what you're here for. Let's get into it. This is not going to be a tedious, tiny little step-by-step tutorial. This is for people who are more of kind of a gearhead a little bit. You do all your own automotive and that kind of stuff. I'm not going to break down taking out every tiny bolt and everything, but I will give torque specs. I did buy the service manual, which you can get from Husqvarna's website. I think it's like 30 bucks if you get just the digital copy. You can always print physical copies out, which is what I did. I just kind of made myself my own step-by-step guide. You know, just you have to pick and choose what you're looking for. Once you open it up, there's not like a just, you know, valve clearance check tutorial. You're going to have to use Control F function and put in like remove the fuel tank, you know, and just go step by step as it goes. Remove your valve covers and top dead center, and just kind of copy and paste it into a Word document. Build your own little tutorial guide. That way, even if you think you know what you're doing, you don't accidentally miss a step when you're putting something back together or you're trying to take it apart. Maybe you forgot to, you know, remove the timing chain tensioner or something and you're removing the valve cams. You can see where that would be a problem. So I will go over some of this stuff, but like I said, I'm not going to get super tedious with it. If you don't do this kind of stuff on your own, then this video is not going to be for you. This is not, I'm going to teach you how to, you know, do every tiny thing to your motorcycle. So right out of the gate, I want to explain how I have this open air box cover on here. Those of you who are probably willing to do the valve clearance check on your bike probably already know the answer to this question, but I put the Cooper ECU, performance ECU on this bike so it can handle this. If you do not have this Cooper ECU, do not put one of these on your bike because your stock ECU will not be able to handle it and you will end up damaging your motorcycle. Just a heads up. But like I said, those of you who are willing to do the valve clearance check probably already know that. Here's a quick rundown of the kind of half-ass instructions I made. I left out a lot of little tiny stuff. I mean, even this fuel tank stuff is really pretty insignificant stuff. You're gonna just naturally start taking stuff apart and just, you know what I mean? It's not gonna be a, oh well, remove these 5 bolts, it's this socket, and I think that's kind of overkill. If you're the type of person who's mechanically inclined anyway, you're not going to need those type of instructions. If you're not feeling comfortable with doing this, then you shouldn't be doing it. Because if you don't do it properly, you're going to tear up your motorcycle and you're going to have no bike at all. But hopefully this will help people save a bunch of money. I know the shops by me were saying that you'd have to leave your bike with them for up to 2 months, and even then it could be around $500. This is a good time to check your coolant level also. Mine was actually below the minimum line. It's the green style coolant, as you can tell. This is on the right hand side of the bike. You may want to purchase one of these $6 transfer pumps from Harbor Freight so that way you can empty the gas tank like I've done here. So it looks like for whatever reason my manual isn't the exact copy for this exact make, model, and year, because these 2 hoses, I'm holding them, my fingers are supposed to come off the top of the tank and they don't. So I've marked them with red and blue marker paint and they go off of these 2 nipples coming out of the tank. I would also recommend putting like blue and red marker paint on your supply and return lines from your fuel pump system as well. if you're in here, you don't want to mix stuff up. So your fuel filter assembly is definitely going to get in your way. So you're going to want to take that out. And you can see I've marked it with green marker paint. And that just plugs into one of your standard fuel line connections right there. And as you can see, we're starting to get the valve cover kind of exposed and everything. Next steps are probably going to be taking this spark plug wire off of here, and then this PCV vent right here off the back of the cover. And before I forget, you will have to loosen this radiator and kind of drop it down out of the way, because you're going to have to be able to get feeler gauges in there for the your exhaust valve clearance check. So I've got the valve cover gasket off here, or the valve cover rather. It is a tight squeeze, as I'm sure you've already heard before. I've already taken off the radiator, so it gave me some room to get my hands in there from the front end. But to get this out of there, you really gotta kind of push it down towards the radiator, turn it sideways, and force it up through there. The tightest spot is going to be, at least it was for me, this wiring harness right here, which you have to push on and kind of tuck it up under the frame, and then you can get it up. You can get it up out of there at about like this angle, so that now that's out of the way. As you can see, we can get to the top end where we got to start doing our real work. So next, I went ahead and pulled this out. You can see it's loose, but I just pried on the top of this bolt head here to that flange, and it just kind of popped it up out of there. As soon as you pull it out, though, a little bit of oil is going to try to go down inside your spark plug hole, so have yourself a little shop towel handy, so that way you're not filling your spark plug hole up with a little bit of oil down in there. I'm going to be pulling my spark plug so that there's no engine compression, so putting my engine in top dead center would be a lot less of a struggle. Alright, so on your left hand side of this down here, you're going to pull this cover off. It's plastic. It should come off really easy with a flat head, and I hope you have a 14 Allen. Not everybody's got one of those in their shop, but this is going to have to come off too, so that way we can start getting this thing lined up for top dead center. You can see the little nipple kind of sticking out like an arrow. That's where you need to line up on the top side here. So now we've turned this engine over several times with no spark plug in the counterclockwise direction, because it says to do it several times. Don't just go around once. And you can see where we're lined up there. I'm going to show you the other side as well. Now, of course, with the trellis frame here, it's going to be a little tough to see, but you can see the markings and how they line up with the top of this block here. The N-LH, EX-RH on both of these cam sprockets, and those are basically just supposed to line up just like that horizontally, as you can see here. So another thing I wanted to point out before I forgot is you can see that the valve cam lobes are facing up. Make sure that they're facing up and not facing down when you try to align your timing marks, because there's two positions at which technically the timing marks would line up. One is with them facing up, the valve cam lobes, and one is with them facing down. You definitely don't want them facing down. So based on your clearance check values, which will be in the manual and of course included in the video you're going to bend your feeler gauges much more aggressively than what I have here, but you're going to have to get it between the bottom of this valve cam and your valve stem cup. You got to slide these things up under here on both sides. Your intake side's on this side, which is towards the rear of the vehicle, and then you'll come in from the radiator up front and do it up there as well. So here's our valve clearance for the exhaust and the intake. Here's the window that you're supposed to be within. They give you kind of a little window to aim for on both of these. And then, this is what I ended up with, which is way out of spec on my intake. And then my exhaust was actually slightly different on each one of them, which was, they were close, but 0.13 and 0.10. And then, so the gaps were, they were using too small of a feeler gauge. So when I take this apart the rest of the way, I'm going to have to put smaller valve shims in. And so I've given myself a little window. I need to go a little bit smaller. You know, here and here and here. These are what I'm going to try to reduce the gap to. And then the valve shims here, which these are supposed to be better than the Hot Cams brand. You know, I'm told the Hot Cams, they're maybe a little bit softer so they don't hold up as long, but you've got tons of different sizes in here. So you'll take out the old ones and then measure them. You may want yourself a good pair of dial calipers here. I don't prefer digital ones, I'm a little old school. So measure your old ones, compare them to the new ones, and try to make your values, you know, where you need them. And of course, once you reassemble everything, you're going to have to check it again just to double check. So now that we've taken our measurements and we know what we need to change, the next step is to take care of this timing chain tensioner. We're going to have to remove it. And so the instructions on that is right here. You can see you're going to remove the center bolt, then take a screwdriver, turn it clockwise, and that's supposed to lock your tensioner. And then you remove the two other bolts with your cover and your gasket. I went ahead and preemptively put a piece of tie wire around my timing chain, because once I remove these two timing cams, the chain's just, nothing's going to be holding it up. It's just going to fall down inside the bottom of your motor, which you obviously don't want, you know, because you won't be able to retrieve it. So I would make sure you preemptively do that before you forget. Alrighty, so I've got the valve cam bearing support. They call it that because it's not just a valve cam like bracket deal. There are no Babbitt style bearings in here. This itself is the bearings, the Babbitt style bearings. So by Babbitt, it would be a horseshoe shaped bearing that goes inside there, but those of you who are working on this probably already know that. Also, be careful with these bolts, all right? They're not all the same length. If you were to put this back together, you know, using too long of a bolt in the wrong spot, you're going to break something, and you definitely don't want that. Here's what we look like now without that in our way. We got our chain tied up with the wire like we showed you earlier. I'm just going to be doing one valve cam at a time, and at this stage hopefully your workbench looks something like this, where you've got things halfway labeled and kind of laid out. So now that we've got the valve cam out of the way, the next thing we're going to do is just basically pick up on these. That's it. And this is the part that touches the cam lobe, and this is where you're actually sliding your feeler gauge. It's in between this and the cam lobe. And then this is supposed to be our valve shim right under here, which I'm going to use a little magnetic pickup tool to pick them out of there. Well, now that I've got my two valve shims out, they're not marked or anything like I kind of suspected. So we've taken our calipers here, measured them, and you want to make sure you're measuring, you know, left hand one, right hand one. So if for some reason they're not the same size, if one, like say this is your second or third time doing your valve shims, whenever they were replaced, maybe one was more worn out than the other. So they don't just expect them to be the same size. They could be different sizes. And so when you go to put it back together, assuming everything's the same, it might be way off, and there you are again, you're just taking everything right back apart. So keep that in mind. Once you've got it back together and you've double, quadruple checked your valve clearances on all your shims, also check to make sure your valve cams, the lobes are in the up position like they were originally, and of course recheck your timing marks on both sides, because once you close it up, that is it. And of course I went ahead and checked the spark plug gap as well. I would suggest you do that also. After you've done that, you will reinstall your timing chain tensioner and release it, because there's a set screw in the middle that locks it. When you do go to take that timing chain tensioner out, you'll need a tiny flathead screwdriver. You'll turn it all the way clockwise, and that will lock the tensioner in place so that you can take out the two bolts that hold it in. And of course, when you put it back in, you'll turn that same screw all the way counterclockwise until it stops, and then that'll tighten up your timing chain again. Now, part of your instructions here are going to be to put some silicone, some gasket maker on your seals here, on your valve cover gasket, and it gives you a Loctite number, but honestly I just use this Permatex RTV high temp gasket maker for all my stuff on all my vehicles, and that's going to go on the little, half moon shaped pieces. And good luck to anybody who can get your valve cover back on the bike with all the silicone on the seal. So I'm finishing up the editing for this video here, and I forgot to mention that you don't actually have to purchase the valve cover gasket. I just bought it in case. My original was just fine. My bike has 9,300 miles on it. It was right at its service interval. But it's good to have the valve cover gasket, buy a new one just in case it gets damaged or whatever. And of course, if you guys have any questions, which I'm sure you will, because there's a lot of stuff I did not include in the video, just get a hold of me. I can send you that Word document that I made with kind of it's got the torque specs and everything on it.